Politics now. We're getting ready, aren't we, for the 2024 election. So we're all starting to watch the numbers very closely, especially in your hotly contested provinces and areas. And things are looking rather bleak for the ANC in KZN. At least 8 opposition parties have come together to be part of the DA's multi-party charter. Now, speaking this past weekend, DA leader John Steenhuisen said the charter is polling at 50%, meaning it could very well topple the ANC. Well, let's get the thoughts then of election analyst Wayne Sussman making time for me this morning. Wayne, good to have you back on ANC. So there's 2 things we want to talk about there. One is KZN, the other is Gauteng. Maybe let's just go with KZN first. I mean, that is the magic number, isn't it? It's apparently 50%. That could be the game changer in KZN, seemingly.
Yeah, thank you, Gareth. I haven't seen the actual poll, but you're 100% correct. That 50% number which John Steenhuisen is speaking about is key. Just to remind the viewers, in 2021, the ANC, the EFF, and the National Freedom Party got 53% of the province's support, whereas those parties in the multi-party charter got 41%, with the IFP winning the lion's share of that 41%. However, since the 2021 local government election, you've seen the IFP surge, and the DA has their weapon called Chris Pappas, who I saw was doing some good dance moves at this Rock the Registration launch. So they are confident that they can get the ANC below. Remember, you've got to get the ANC below 50%, and you've got the ANC and their partners below 50%. So it's still a while to go. I would be surprised if the multi-party charter is currently on 50%, but I do agree with the way you started the segment that the ANC is in trouble in KwaZulu-Natal.
And is there anything that can be done at this point? Is this a case of the DA and the multi-party charter capitalizing on that bleakness, or does the ANC take a lesson from this and go, look, if we don't do something, we are in serious trouble, or is the clock run out? Is it just too close to elections now?
There's a lot of time left between now and election. That's why I'm glad we're having this conversation this morning. So first of all, the IFP is dealing with the fact that obviously its founder, its President Emeritus, Mangosuthu Buthelezi, recently passed away. The party was showing tremendous momentum. Now, can the party stay together and remain galvanized between now and the election? If it can do so, it'll cause not just the ANC, but the EFF a lot of trouble. And I just want to go back to Chris Pappas and the DA. I do not think that Chris Pappas and the DA are necessarily going to take a lot of ANC votes, but they can energize their own voter blocks. Remember, there are a lot of voters in eThekwini, there's a lot of Indian voters in Durban, particularly, and also Pietermaritzburg. If Chris Pappas can energize those voters to put their cross behind the DA, and you see a party like Action SA do well, you might see this multi-party charter bring the ANC below 50% and have a shot at power, but it's still a while to go. So they do have the chance to do it, whether they remain disciplined, whether they remain on track, whether they remain having the momentum they've gathered between the 2021 local government elections and today with by-elections, then they do have a chance, but it's still a while to go.
And are you starting to get a sense that when you start talking about this 50%, that magic number we spoke about earlier, do you think the electorate really gets a grasp of what these multi-charter party agreements mean? Because it's 50%, but it's a spread, isn't it? It's not the DA's 50%, it's everyone that's involved with them, and that complicates things.
Correct. Again, you're going to be voting for a party in 2024. If you're choosing to vote for one of those 8 opposition parties, you're not voting for the multi-party charter, you're voting for the Action SA, DA, United Independent Movements, IFP, etc. So that will take time for people to get their head around. However, I do think the multi-party charter, we're seeing more of these kind of amalgamations happening with smaller parties and blocks as well, is that it does give donors a chance to say, wow, parties are collaborating, let's give them an extra buck. It does give opposition voters who are saying, we can't topple the ANC, saying, if opposition parties work together, maybe we can do so. So on a practical level, there's not much benefit, but there are indirect benefits to it.
Do you get a sense as well that, especially we'll move to Gauteng in a moment, of course, but KZN, we often hear when we get into elections itself, and we had you with us the last elections, talking about there's a difference between the opposition parties, I don't want to pick just on the DA because it's this coalition, but the opposition parties as a collective, is it a case of that they are making the inroads into KZN, or is it because the ANC is losing ground? It's two very different discussions, isn't it?
It's a great question. So therefore, let's focus on the IFP. They've had a tremendous year in by-elections in KwaZulu-Natal. Their growth has not just been at the expense of the ANC, but also actually, to a great extent, the decline of the EFF in KwaZulu-Natal. So there you see a party doing very, very well. They're growing because of not just the decline of the big elephant in the room, the ANC, but other parties as well, and the National Freedom Party. So so you don't just want to take away votes from the ANC, you want to take away votes from the parties who are likely to work with the ANC as well. And in KwaZulu-Natal, I know the ANC and the EFF are fighting nationally at the moment, but I think that if the ANC does fall below 50% in KwaZulu-Natal, they turn to the EFF, and that's why the IFP's surge in KwaZulu-Natal is very good for the multi-party charter.
Let's talk Gauteng for a moment, because I see a survey that's come out from the Brenthurst Group, who is, I think, arguably one of the more credible groups when it comes to looking at numbers of the elections as well. They're saying, and I want to quote, ANC support in Gauteng could drop to 37% in 2024 as well. Now, you've got these two battlegrounds, don't you, arguably, Gauteng and KZN, and to have that drop down to 37% in, one would say, it's the financial centre of the country. You could, I suppose, argue with the Western Cape, but that's also a worrying number for the ANC. So they're getting hammered from both sides here.
Correct. And just to remind the viewers, in 2019, and I remember being glued to my monitors, watching the ANC hovering between the 50 and 49% mark. They got just over 50% of the vote. But in the 2021 local government elections, unprecedented, the ANC fell to below 40% in Gauteng. And that trend continues to hold in Gauteng. Why? Because the ANC is in trouble in its traditional strongholds like Soweto and in townships across the province, where Action SA, as an example, and the EFF to some extent, have been taking away ANC votes. So I can believe that poll which says that the ANC is in deep trouble. And in Gauteng, the ANC will definitely need to look for coalition partners. We know, as I just referred to earlier, the ANC is having this the skirmish right now, the EFF, its coalition partner in many of the metros. So I think that is a very credible number, that the ANC is below 40% in Gauteng.
It is a very worrying number as well if you are a member of the ANC. Wayne, thank you very, very much. Do you see why we've dragged Wayne Sussman in here so early on a Monday morning? Because he makes sense. He has the history, he has the context, he has the insight to explain why these numbers are the way they are and how things could potentially change ahead of next year's elections. Always wonderful to have political analyst Wayne Sussman joining us, elections specialist as well, joining us here on ENC8.